What's going on? Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to be talking about our new Speaker of the House. I believe it's Johnson, Michael Johnson, Mike Wazowski. I don't really know. Either way, we're going to talk about how we got here. The House has been shut down for 3 weeks now. 3 weeks, we finally have a House, which means we can finally do business, right? So that means we can finally pass bills. As you saw, the president did his speech from the Oval Office requesting that there be more aid for Ukraine and Israel, and we have a border crisis. So we're not going to focus on all that. We're going to focus on the speakership. We're going to talk about how we even got to this point. So, as most of you know, former Speaker Kevin McCarthy was elected after 15 rounds just because there was about 6 players that were like, they weren't really feeling it. We're going to go into that and how we got to our new speaker right here on the last conversation. All right, so now let's talk about Kevin McCarthy. We did a whole episode on this in our last podcast, but now we're going to talk about him just briefly here. Kevin McCarthy, as you know, he's from California, won his speakership after 15 rounds. There was about 6 members who held out the longest, right? They were the far right Trumper group that wanted certain concessions, they wanted certain privileges, they wanted certain committees. I actually have idea what are the concessions that he had to give up. So it says the concessions that he agreed to for him to get the power of speakership would hold considerably less power than his predecessor, Democrat Nancy Pelosi. That will make it hard for him to agree to deals with Democrats in a divided Washington. Allowing a single member to call for a vote to remove the speaker will give headliners extraordinary leverage. The agreement would cap spending for the next fiscal year at last year's level, amounting to a significant cut when inflation and population growth are taken into account. That could meet resistance from more centrist Republicans or those who have pushed for greater military funding, particularly as the United States is spending billions of dollars to help Ukraine fend off a Russian assault. Moderate Republicans like Ben Fitzpatrick said that he was not worried that the House would effectively be run by hardliners. He told reporters, "It's aspirational. We still have our voting cards." But those aren't just the concessions that he gave, right? He also gave them as the vacate the power. That was probably one of the biggest issues with his speakership is that Nancy Pelosi, she took that off the table. She was like, that's not how this is working, right? Because vacating the chair literally means that one person, and we're about to get into this in a few minutes, one person in your party could be like, you're not doing the job correctly. And that's what Matt Gaetz, who's from Florida, did. The other reason that McCarthy's not also speaker is because he went on State of the Union, which is a televised TV show, and we were in a looming government shutdown. Like the government was about to shut down within like 9 to 10 hours. And he went on the State of the Union and he pretty much blamed Democrats for why we couldn't fund the government. If I can find that clip, I will probably edit and put it into our podcast so you can listen to it. But essentially, that's what he did. And you were like, why would he do that? And essentially, when the government passed, because he made concessions with Democrats to make sure the government was funded, that's when his own party decided to turn against him. But as I said, he was already going into a speakership on a very thin ice. Like, they wanted inquiries to impeach Biden, which is still going on, which actually aren't going on right. Well, they're going on now because now we have a House Speaker. For about 3 weeks, nothing was being done. So he opened one, even though he said on public television he didn't believe that there was enough, but he had to do it. Like I said, there was about 6 people who they really controlled the House. Kevin just was in the chair. So we're going to move on to how he lost the speakership. Now we learned how he got it. Now we're going to focus on how he lost it. You can thank Matt Gaetz. As I said, he's a Republican congressman for Florida. And let me just put this out there just a little bit. Shutting down the government means that if you're a federal employee, you're not getting paid. Our grandparents who are on Social Security means that that check that they need to probably pay rent isn't coming. It's going to be late. All of our service members and women who are out there actively serving, they wouldn't get paid. And yet, Matt Gaetz wanted a shutdown. Like, how could you agree to all these people not getting their paychecks, living, they might not be able to pay rent. They might get kicked out. Who knows? So let's talk about that next. So if I ever post this video on YouTube, you will see that I have taken off my headphones. I've put them on and I've taken them off again. Because how I'm recording, I can't hear myself in my headphones, which is kind of weird. So, but anyways, that's a little OCD moment. So now let's talk about Kevin McCarthy being ousted. As I told you, Gaetz led the charge. Now, McCarthy said he wasn't scared. Like, he told them to bring it on, which was the worst thing to do when you are in that type of position, right? Because I think Kevin probably thought it was just going to be one person. It wound up being 6. Now, to get the speakership, because Republicans have such a narrow majority, he could only lose 4 people, right? So all he truly needed was to lose 4 people, or in this case, he lost 6 people. But Matt Gaetz gives his reason of why he believes or why he did what he did. He said Speaker McCarthy made an agreement with House conservatives in January, and since then has been in brazen, repeatedly material breaches of that agreement, Gaetz said. This agreement that made with Democrats is really a blow past a lot of the spending guardrails we set up is a last straw. He added, I do intend to file a motion to vacate against Speaker McCarthy this week. This was passed, obviously. I think we need to rip off the Band-Aid. I think we need to move on with new leadership that's going to be trustworthy. That promise from Gaetz is an escalation in the months-long standoff between McCarthy and the right flank of his conference, which forced him to go through 15 rounds of votes in January to finally win the gavel. As part of the winning the top job in the House, McCarthy made the deal that he would allow one member to advance the motion to vacate. And now it's come to pass. So McCarthy's response to Gaetz later that Sunday was straightforward, telling a Republican to bring it on. You don't say that to someone who potentially has the power to oust you. But he goes on. He said, that's nothing new. He said on Face Nation, yes, I'll survive. This is a personal with Matt. Matt voted against the most conservative ability to protect our borders, secure our borders. He's more interested in securing TV interviews than doing something. He added, so be it. Bring it on. Let's get over with it. Let's start governing. And then he was ousted. And then for 3 weeks, we didn't govern. So McCarthy, you're probably kicking yourself in the ass at this point. So McCarthy's moment of reckoning may have finally come after President Joe Biden on Saturday signed the bill to keep the government open mid-November, just minutes before funding was set to expire at midnight. McCarthy made a sharp about facing earlier in the day and worked with Democrats to overwhelmingly pass a continuing resolution that would avoid a shutdown. The Senate passed the bill on a bipartisan basis later Saturday. If you're watching the news on Face the Nation, McCarthy went on and blamed Democrats of why the government was in the state it was. He's like, "Oh well, we had a bill that was really good, but those damn Democrats, they just didn't want to sign it." And once the Democrats saw that, they were like, "Wait, what the what? It's not us, it's you." He kind of sealed his own fate, especially when they were talking about ousting him. The move by McCarthy could cost him his job, as Gates has been promising about daily. GOP Representative Eli Crane of Arizona, another Republican hardliner who's been critical of McCarthy, signaled support for his ousted on that Saturday. Crane said, "Let's roll." CNN reported on that Friday that Gates has been approaching Democrats about potential successors to McCarthy if he were to file a motion to vacate, which would force the House to vote on whether to oust the Speaker. McCarthy has been defiant and on Saturday challenged his defectors to try and push him out of job. McCarthy had said that if somebody wants to make a motion against him to bring it on, there has to be an adult enthronement. I'm going to govern with what's best in the country. The Florida Republican, accused of lying in negotiations over the continuing resolution. But the one thing that has everybody in common is that nobody trusts Kevin McCarthy. He lied to Biden, he lied to House conservatives, he had appropriators marketing to a different number altogether. And the reason we're back against the shutdown politics is not a bug of the system, it's a feature. The senior Democratic source told CNN that most members of the caucus are skeptical about saving McCarthy, given that he has shown little interest in working with Democrats and that he's launched an impeachment inquiry into Biden. One thing I want to say is that during a lot of these CNN interviews, they were asking different congressmen and women of Democrats, and most of them were like, we don't know about saving them because they didn't know if there was a deal to be made. Like, is it worth saving him? Because then if they save him, they're going to want some type of concessions. They're going to want something in return. And if he's not making the promises on his own part, why do you necessarily think he's going to make concessions on the Democrats and actually hold them up? And most of his Republican colleagues would not want to share power of the House with Democrats. McCarthy's sources has reached out to Democratic leaders in serious negotiation on that issue, but there could be some rank and file Democrat moderates who try and find a way to help McCarthy stay in power. But as I said, most of them are kind of like, well, you kind of just blame the government shutdown on us on Face the Nation. Why are we going to help you? Democratic Republican Alexander Acosta said on Sunday in a separate interview on State of the Union, said absolutely she would vote to oust Kevin McCarthy. She goes on to say, "I think Kevin McCarthy is a very weak speaker. He clearly has lost control of his caucus. He's brought the United States and millions of Americans to the brink, waiting until the final hour to keep the government open, and even then only issuing a 45-day extension. It's clear that Gates has been working for days, if not longer, to take the temperature of House Democrats and their desire to force McCarthy out. The only way for Kevin McCarthy is Speaker of the House at the end of this coming week is if Democrats bail him out. Now, probably will. I actually think when you believe in nothing as Kevin McCarthy does, everything's negotiable. I think he'll get a deal with Democrats." When asked if he would have Democrats help oust McCarthy, Gates said, "I think Democrats should vote against him for free." So that's how we got to ousting Kevin McCarthy. So let's review it more like bullet points, because that was probably a lot that I said. Matt Gaetz, Congressman of Florida, wanted to oust him because, as he said, he lied to not only Biden, he lied to the caucus as well. He put people in special places where they shouldn't have been, whether that's committees. He also wasn't supposed to make all these concessions about the government shutdown, right? But he made all these concessions with Democrats to get it passed. And that's something that Matt Gaetz just didn't like to begin with. So with all that, Kevin was finally voted out. And then the war for trying to find a new speaker begun. So for 3 weeks, we went through Steve Scalise, we went through Jim Jordan, and now we have this Mike Johnson. So Steve Scalise was a vital option in a backdoor voting. He was actually voted. But then for like a House vote, no one was going to support him. Jim Jordan ran 3 times. All 3 times got rejected. After the third time, his caucus was like, please shut up, sit down, and stop trying to run for House Speaker. Mike Johnson was endorsed by President Trump, which is why his entire party voted for him, without a doubt. So we don't really know, or I don't truly know about this Mike Johnson. In our next episode, we'll actually talk about him. And so now that Kevin McCarthy is, you're probably like, well, Stefan, what happens next? Now we enter a 3-week battle of who's going to be House Speaker next. Now, Steve Scalise is majority leader of the Republicans for the House. So obviously you would think that he would be next up. No, he wasn't. So it becomes Scalise versus Jordan in the battle of becoming House Speaker. So the battle to win the House Speakership could hinge on the contingent of more moderate Republicans uneasy about the conservative politics of their 2 leading candidates and angry at their hardline faction for ousting Kevin McCarthy in this week's unprecedented floor vote. Now remember, at this point, there's still about 45 days from another government shutdown. So it's like time is ticking. And within that 45, we lost 3 weeks. So behind the scenes, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise of Louisiana and House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan of Ohio have been making a direct pitch for more centrist members, both insisting they will make their re-election battles a priority and ensure more stability atop from the badly divided conference, according to sources. So Jordan and Scalise have made overtures to a bloc of New York Republicans who are among the most valuable in the House and would be considered a key prize for whichever candidate wins them over. Scalise plans to meet, well, he met with virtually on Friday with freshman GOP lawmakers and a separate group of more mainstream Republicans after Jordan made his case to the latter group during a call on Thursday. He goes on to say that they have to lay out for us a real understanding that members like me not only deserve a seat at the table, but our voices have to be represented and heard. A New York GOP Mark Manarito, maybe I'm saying that wrong, who has not endorsed a candidate but said that Scalise and Jordan, and so they can raise that challenge. Side note, our best friend, I don't know, I'm never mind. It'll come to me. What's his? Representative Carlos of Florida, a McCarthy ally who considered himself central right, said Jordan certainly can win me over. He was one of Kevin McCarthy's most vocal supporter. Jordan gained a key endorsement Friday from former President Donald Trump. Jordan is also a congressman who denies that January 6th even happened. He believes that Trump still won the presidency, so he's one of those. But as I said, you have a shutdown and the motion to vacate is still an issue at this time. So the center of demands for many of more moderate Republicans winning assertions that the government doesn't shut down in mid-November while changing the rules so no one member can do that to do what Matt Gaetz did successfully by calling a vote. Watching all this unfold on CNN, a lot of the members said that they still wanted that rule for whoever became speaker. That rule must still stand. Next week, when we talk about Mike Johnson, and I start doing my research, I'll see if he took the same deal because some of them were like, no, I'm not taking that. But a lot of the members were like, hey, You want to be speaker? That rule has to be on the books. One of the freshmen said, I want to see conference rules change. Max Miller, a freshman for Ohio, I want to see the motion to vacate go back to a majority at 112. Asked if he could comment or commit to backing a candidate who doesn't commit to changing the powerful rule, Miller said it's going to be very tough. Another representative from Louisiana told CNN that he wants to discuss the rule changes before holding speaker elections, telling reporters on Wednesday, I think before we have a single discussion about the speaker, we've got to discuss the function of the position. During his call with the business-minded Main Street caucus on Thursday, Jordan also said any changes to the motion to vacate would be needed to be a conference decision. The Main Street caucus is pushing to make that a mechanism harder to use under current rules, which McCarthy agreed to when he was trying to win the job in January. Any one member can use it to oust a speaker. Some hardliners are insisting the rules stay in place. The moderates did weigh their opinion because they're pretty much important to this too. Several Republicans believe that it would be hard for either candidate to get the needed votes, which we've seen. Steve Scalise was voted behind the doors, but then out in public, literally demolished. Particularly in such a short time frame. Some hardliners are skeptical about Scalise, while some moderates, especially in Biden-won districts, are worried about Jordan's flame-throwing brand of politics. Jordan is one of the faces of Biden's impeachment inquiry, which some of the moderates have been openly skeptical about. One moderate Republican said that they are not anxious to support Jordan. Jordan's challenges is that he built the monster that's part of the problem. One Republican from a swing district raised concerns about Jordan's opposition and more funding for Ukraine and his vote against stopgap funding bill to keep the government open, which means he wanted a shutdown. I'm concerned that his stance on Ukraine Republicans can't pull the rug out from, which is defending itself from a Russian invasion. Something that Jordan has said openly and publicly is that if he was speaker, he would not give his blessing for Ukraine. Like, he would essentially pull the funding away. Like, whenever the funding that the Pentagon had, what we already agreed to, it would run out, he wouldn't be the one that you should look for to get more funding. Another swing district Republican, however, said they're on the fence. They agreed Scalise has been very good in the swing district Republicans and has a strong sensitivity for what majority makers need politically. But the member also said they want to get to yes on Jordan, though they would say he would be a riskier choice. Lawmakers have said that they would actually want to keep the motion to vacate in place so they could have a tool to keep potential Speaker Jordan in check, which, I mean, isn't a bad idea at all. Like, if Jordan, which he's not, and I don't think he'll run for Speaker again, but if he did, that would actually be a very powerful tool to keep in place, at least for him, because we already know what side he's on. Like, who's really calling the shots? Is he calling the shots or is Trump calling the shots, right? They go on to say that I may want that low threshold on a motion to vacate if a speaker doesn't bring good governance. There's also a discussion among some of the swing district Republicans about voting together and making demands as a bloc, mimicking the playbook of the hardliners who ousted McCarthy. We know that if we stick together and assert our priorities, we're likely to get accommodated. So now you're like, well, where does this go? Let's talk about fundraising. The six people who ousted Kevin McCarthy, a lot of the other Republicans have said that they would not get fundraising. They wouldn't get help on reelection, and that money would be a huge issue. It takes a lot of money to be in Congress, but let's go into it. So during the Main Street caucus meeting on Thursday, Jordan promised to protect moderates and vowed not to put them in tough positions according to the call. Represent Nick, one of the valued New York Republicans, spoke up on the call and noted that the Freedom Caucus tends to listen to Jordan, who helped found the group. Latoya has not endorsed any candidate yet. In a private conversation with some New York Republicans, sources say Jordan has empathized that he cares about the issues that matter to them, nothing he's held in his field learning. His field hearing on crime in New York, and also a fierce advocate for border security. Jordan has also pitched his conservative background as an advantage to moderates, arguing that his ties to GOP hardliners make him the best positioned candidate to bring the divided conference together. In the late election cycle, Scalise, who has the advantage of having been in the upper ranks of leadership for years, has raised over $53 million, while Jordan, who recently became Judiciary Chair, has raised more than $14 million. In his pitch, Jordan's pitch to members, sources say Scalise has argued that he has the experience, staff operations, institutional knowledge to govern the GOP conference. And as a former head of a Republican study committee, the largest conservative group in Congress, Scalise could have more credibility with the right McCarthy did. However, becoming Speaker also needed to address the looming government funding deadline in November to avert a shutdown on a stopgap spending bill. Jordan said he would not work with Democrats, but thought they could do a better job on messaging it. McCarthy's opponents have cited the California Republican resilience on Democrats voted to avert a shutdown last weekend was the reason why for ousting him. To win the speakership, the candidate first needs to win a majority of the 221 members of House GOP conference in a secret ballot election, followed by a majority of the full House, which currently stands at 433 members, with the 2 vacancies. The winning candidate needs to secure 217 votes if all are present and voting, meaning Republicans can only afford to lose 4 votes. Getting to 217 is a very steep climb, and it ought to be. So, we still have a government shutdown. Fortunately, you don't have to worry about Scalise, and you don't have to worry about Jim Jordan becoming Speaker. Now we have Mike Johnson, who was voted in the House. So we're not going to go into Mike Johnson in this episode. Our next episode will go into it. I just don't want this episode to be too long. In our final little 10-minute piece, we're going to talk about me. Yay! Because some of you don't know who I am. And I want you to know who I am so you know where I stand and what type of content I'll be bringing to you. So, now here's the fun part where I get to talk about myself. So, first off, my name is Stephon Garrison. I live here in this beautiful state of Florida. And I am a political science major at Arizona State University. I started podcasting about 3 years ago with my first podcast called Building a Better Community. And we did that for about a year, and then we got invited to come on this amazing platform called Fireside. We changed the name of the podcast to The Conversation. And I mean, we had some amazing conversations. We had over 22,000 followers, and it was amazing. Some of those episodes I will be posting here in the last conversation just to give you pretty much a taste of what we were doing before. Yes, I am African American descent. I have worked in law enforcement as well, so I bring quite a bit of knowledge to the table when it comes to this. I call myself a jack of all trades, or at least that's what I'm trying to be, right? But when it comes to podcasting, I learn something new every day. Getting those followers, for me, just doing this, that's all I did, and I tried to improve every single show I would do. But honestly, with you guys, I just want to be able to give you a different point of view, for you to be able to understand who's behind the camera. This is a one person show, literally a one person show. So I record, I edit, I publish all by myself. There's no fancy team behind me. I don't send it out and have some amazing publisher do it. All of this is done in. I also have a job where I travel a lot every day. I'm traveling somewhere, which means I have been buying equipment. I've been trying to do everything I can to try and pull this videos. I would have done this episode a lot sooner, but like I said, it's trying to find the right equipment, trying to find the right technology to bring you the best content that I possibly can so you love the show. You're always more welcome to follow us on our social media platform. You can find us at the last underscore conversation. You can find us that on TikTok. Because as I said, I travel a lot. And I'll be doing little short videos about what's going on in the news. And I'll be posting those on our Instagram and our TikTok as well. So you're more than welcome to always go into the comments and be like, hey, nice getting to know you. Or maybe you didn't know something about me. Whatever the case may be. I represent a lot. I have doing political science as my major. I've been building up my platform, which is called Being Human. And the Being Human platform honestly means what it means. It means just treating everyone like a decent human being. We're always persecuting people for the color of their skin, their sexuality, who they lay with, what their religion is, what their political affiliation is, or whatever. And some of those people in those groups are being persecuted just for doing that. And so with our platform called Being Human, it means supporting all that. It means supporting women, right? It means supporting small Black businesses. It means supporting the Boys and Girls Club, or it means supporting the Trevor Project, which helps young LGBTQ kids not want to commit suicide. Even Suicide Awareness Month, we talk about that. And we talk about we go a little step further and we talk about law enforcement suicide rate, which a lot of people don't know. So we talk about a lot of these issues, and that's what Being Human, the platform is about, building that and just treating people the way that we all want to be treated. We say that and we're like, oh, well, yeah, we want it. But then no one does it. Or only select few actually do it. And then the rest of the world, you look at it and you're like, why? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? But that's pretty much me in a nutshell. Over the course of our next episodes, you'll learn more little pieces about me. Thank you for joining me for this second episode as we talked about Kevin McCarthy. We talked about Steve Scalise. For the next episode that I air, we'll talk about Mike Johnson. Because there's a lot of stuff about that's currently now put out that I'm not a huge fan of. Plus, we have still a looming government shutdown that's about to happen in less than 30 days. Actually, less than 20 at this. So we'll find out if we have another government shutdown. It's a chaos. I can already see it. So be kind, be safe, be different. Treat everyone the way that you want to be treated, and I will see you guys or hear you guys or listen to you guys or some way we'll be in communication. Thank you for coming to the second episode. I won't even say coming. Thank you for listening to the second episode of The Last Conversation. Be blessed.